The discussion today is about what we're doing in the garden during fall. If you have greenhousing, like stuff here, I have greenhousing at home. I'll start planting lettuce and other green crops like mesclun, which is the combination of all those different greens, in mud flats. The plain old, there they are on the table, the big square ones, the square plastic flats over there. I'll just take a sheet of paper, line the bottom of the flat with one layer of it, kind of folding it at the corners, dump an organic potting soil into it, broadcast the seeds lightly over the top of the flat, cover it with another layer of soil, a little bit of organic fertilizer, pack it down, and then I put it on my greenhouse benches, or I put it out in the garden under row cover on the ground, and I'll grow the greens in these flats. That way when the stuff, you're picking it as baby greens is the point. We're harvesting baby greens this way. And you get greens, say, about so big. I just pick them up, set them on the table, put my chair down, take a pair of scissors, cut them off the top of the flat. So instead of having to stoop down and work out there, in the garden like this, so I can actually get the greens up in my face. And then when I get done cutting, I'll put a little fertilizer on there again, maybe some fish emulsion, liquid to stimulate things. And I can usually manage 3 cuttings off of these flats of baby greens before they're spent. And so that's a really nice way to work here in the winter if you want a constant harvest of greens coming at you. That's really easy to do. And if you actually have them like up on a table in the greenhouse, you're not going to get bird problems, snail problems as much, and a lot of other issues, and no dirt in your greens. This is nice. And if you got a whole lot of them, you can recycle an old washing machine to wash them too. If you're going into commercial production, that is a good washer. You can spin dry, think just like your salad spinner. Yeah. Make sure you get all the soap out of the old washer first. So we got corn salad on here. That's another one of the greens that can be used. Mustard crops, onions. We've already talked about them, and the green bunching onions, which are the scallions. I usually don't separate those 2 crops. What I will do is usually use a good sweet variety of onion, like a Walla Walla, or like our California red onions. I use like a good sweet red or white or yellow onion, and I usually plant them a little closer in part of the garden, so with the intention of going out, pulling out some green onions across the winter, and then leaving the rest to bulb out to full size. So you can do it that way so you can get a little more cropping out of the same ground. Peas. I don't think there's anything better. I really don't. There's all kinds of peas out there, and a lot of people like to plant the oriental pea up with this thing called sugar snap. This is the first improvement in peas since Mendel figured out they were smooth and wrinkled. Okay, this is a wonderful crop. It can be used just like the Chinese stir-fry snow pea when it's picked young, because it'll be a flat pod that's very tender and sweet, delicious. But if you leave it on the vine, instead of like the Chinese pea will get hard, nasty, and bitter, and it's good for nothing once it passes that certain stage. These will continue developing until they have full-size sweet English peas on the inside. Most of you know this crop. I think it's got the edible sweet pod, large succulent thing with the little sweet peas in the middle. This thing is ripe, or is usable from almost beginning to end. So this has a very long picking window. The plant is good sown as early as August. Sow it again in September if you want. Sow it again in October. Sow now when you get home. Skip. Wait till February. Start sowing again. Sow as late as April. And oftentimes sown properly around September or October, so they really get sized up. You can start getting crops of these before Christmas that will continue growing sometimes all the way till April Fool's Day. And it's a marvel. It's just a small stretch, 8-foot trellis. Now make sure your trellises are tall, because if you haven't grown this, it easily goes beyond 6 feet. Okay, so even if your trellis ends at 6 feet, put some little bamboo sticks up. You can size some twine to or something later, because they keep going, and the wind likes to trash them if you don't give them something to crawl on. But they're good raw. They're good stir-fried. They're good in so many different ways. Potatoes will go in after New Year's. Spinach now, spinach again later. Spinach is a good crop as far as the nutrient value is concerned. A little bit of folic acid there and some iron and so on. Turnips, another good. Sure, somebody found something in that list that was delicious to them. Most of it is to me. I actually prefer some of these. A world without garlic, it's over.
What about kale and radishes?
Kale, another one, wasn't on the list, you're right. In fact, almost everything that's a crucifer in the col group. So that would be, the cauliflowers, the cabbages, the kales, the kohlrabis, the Brussels sprouts, any of the other oddballs out there, like, the purple cauliflowers and so on, different variations. There are some perennial cauliflowers and broccolis out there too, mostly European seed, Romanesco. Any of those. Radish, yes, to an extent. Radish can have stress issues if it's planted too late. They're such a quick crop, they can't hang around. And so you have to plant radishes when the weather is perfect for them to ram right through from a seed to a bulb in about 25 days. If you have them planted now and greening, they're going to mature before it gets too short. Otherwise, hold off till February. You get better results with less bulbs, and don't crowd them.
What about parsnips?
Parsnip is more of a summertime crop. Yeah, it will hold over the winter, and it gets better by spring. So parsnip, if you had planted it back sometime from spring to summer, left it in the ground all winter for harvesting, the colder it gets, the better the parsnip tastes. Celery, it wasn't on here. Very good. Yes, this is excellent time. Have your celery plants in now. And a suggestion on celery plants too. One, the snails and slugs will scar the outside of that stuff, and so set yourself up so maybe you're mulching with sand. This is one way that it's done. I've done that before. Snails don't like sand much, and if you mulch the patch with sand, they won't get in there as much. Do snail control before you plant, and keep it up, because if you get too many of them inside the patch, you're going to have big brown nasty stripes up the sides of your ribs. Otherwise, there are all kinds of things about blanching celery, and you can go through the traditional practice of taking the stalks, bundling them, tying them together, and so on. I find it's much more permaculture to just plant my celery in triangulated grids on about 10-inch centers roughly, I think, and I'll plant maybe 4 rows wide in triangulation so that the celery plants jam against each other to push the ribs up straight so you get the blanched hearts. By doing that, you can force the celery to blanch itself.
How about leeks and
Leeks and endive. Endive is year-round here, and it seems to really like warm weather for growth. It's a good choice when it gets too hot and dry in the summer and lettuce is driving you crazy. Endive, in fact, I like to have late summer crops of endive because it is a little bit on the strong side, tends to be somewhat better even on the best of crops. And so in fall, if I didn't have my lettuce when I wanted it because of August heat, I'll use endive with sweet apples from my trees in salad, with maybe walnuts too, because they're cropping. And the little bit of apple or pear in with the endive in a salad knocks that bitter edge off and makes just a delicious salad. Yeah. Endive, walnuts, and apples and vinaigrette. Do that. Leeks, yes. Leeks fall into the same group with garlic and onions. It's alliums. Actually, on onions, then to generalize, almost all alliums. The only 2 exceptions of the onion group that don't seem to grow much in the winter is shallots and chives. Shallots and chives seem to like the warmer, longer days, and so they do better at that, in spring plantings. But anything else, leeks this time of year, great.
So with leeks, is it going to be like with onions that you're saying that it's a little too late to start them from seed?
From seed, you missed the boat, but you can buy a 6-pack somewhere, I bet.
What do I need on the soil for these to really?
That's exactly where I'm going. We still have 12 minutes to cover that. Sure. Okay, first off, whatever it is you're doing in spring when you're putting in tomatoes, you're doing it again now. Okay, so the application of compost to the ground, always, these things happen because our gardening season doesn't really stop here, but you do have 2 times where you're taking out the warm and putting in the cool and kind of going back and forth. Those are your opportunities to do something serious with the ground. And so if you need to apply compost, which you always need to apply compost because it's always going away, so organic matter in some form. And really, from my mind, Doesn't matter what it is so much. It's just that you're doing it. And it doesn't have to be dug in deeply. I own a tiller, but I never use it in my yard. Everything goes on top. I don't dig anything in, okay? But that's my approach, because in my brain, digging in is exposing microbes and fungi to the sun that kills them. Digging in is cutting the worms apart. The only time I go digging is when I've got gophers and I have to get traps in the tunnels. And that's an excellent thing to be doing right now. If you have rodents, right now you can go out there and without destroying anything that you were growing in the garden, you can start to do a gopher patrol. I'm in the midst of the gopher from hell right now. He's eaten 3 road flares, I don't know how much strychnine bait and so on, and he's still there. Yeah, he's a bad one. He's got a tunnel the size of the diameter of my forearm. Came in out of the neighbor's yard. He was there for probably 20 years. The guy poured foundation, and the gopher says, I can't deal with this. Came into my yard. He goes, whoa, look what Bill's been growing. I should have come next door, you know. Well, now I've been after him. Anyway, so it's a good time to patrol for rodents right now in between your transition, because you can tear everything up and it won't matter. You want to use compost. You want to take those fall leaves that you have and use those either directly on the soil as a mulch, especially around things like your fruit trees and stuff. Be careful with mulching on top of the ground around vegetable plants in the fall. The biggest problem is that the mulch will keep the heat in the soil from escaping at night. And I've seen before where I put down mulches around plants that tend to be frost hardy, and we got a 50-year freeze and it killed all the plants above the mulch because the heat can't get out of the ground. Okay? So mulching around things that are perfectly hardy, mulching around your asparagus, mulching around dormant things, and so all good stuff. But as far as mulching around, say, brand new cabbage plants, I would probably leave the soil open at this time of the year so that the sun can heat it and the warmth can come out again at night if it gets cold. Applying your fertilizers again now in the solid form. My typical approach to gardening is that nitrogen is always disappearing, especially. That's the first number on the fertilizer bag. Phosphorus and potassium, if you got them, tend to hang around. They're more stationary in the soil. Nitrogen's gone. It's basically a gas in one state, and it definitely moves away. So you have to address it constantly, and you're doing your initial installation of plants. Put a solid fertilizer down. Use like a Dr. Earth Organic, or use some chicken manure, or if you got horse manure that's kind of aged, work that in, whatever it is that you like to do. I personally do not use manure. When I had chickens I did, but I had to do something with the stuff, okay? And it's good stuff, but I don't use manure anymore. I use other materials in general. But put a solid of some kind down in your initial planting. If the crop is something that's going to hold up for a long time out there, like garlic and onions will be there all winter long, then you can address the fertilizer needs over the course of the winter by using liquids. I like fish emulsion. I think it's great. I use it through a hose-on applicator, and I use it to top dress crops after they've been installed because it's simple. It's Bill's Miracle-Gro, dead fish out of a hose. It'll call in every cat in the neighborhood, but the gophers hate it. Yeah. And if you are one who the Dungeness season open today, if you're a recreational crab fisher, you're going to have junk left over, and so a great time to dig it into the ground, especially stuff like crab that takes a long time to break down. Dig it into the fall. If you're a recreational fisherman, or if you have an in with the local fish market for guts and heads and stuff, dig it in the fall. Absolutely. It will take almost a month at least to age good enough to be good for planting over. So putting some of those more noxious, great fertilizer items into the ground, fall's a super time to do it.
Is that okay to put that in an open compost pile also?
No, don't compost fish. It'll turn into such a mess. Fish does not compost well, especially unless you have a perfect 21-day compost going on with absolute balance of nitrogen, and the fish was ground up fairly fine when you tossed it in, then it will cook. It will cook. But if you're taking, the corpse of a salmon and tossing it in there, I throw a little bit. I mean, I get some salmon skin or something goes in my compost heap, but I don't ever use large pieces of dead fish in the heap. They go directly in the soil.
And how deep?
It depends on how big your dog is.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, if you got a dog like mine would usually manage to get them up from at least 12 inches, you know, and then roll in them.